Good morning, everyone. I'd like to tell you something about myself. My name is Mrs. Frances Brown. I'm Reddick East Resident Association leader. I've been living in Reddick over 30 years. This is a great thing that the mayor is doing. We had trolleys back in 1920, and they stopped in 61. But if you notice, 61, if you turn it around, is 16. So the mayor's bringing it back. And why I think it's a great idea, because a lot of times seniors don't like going underground. I'm one of them. I don't like underground trains. So having a streetcar, I think, is a very great idea. And I just love the idea for the seniors to be able to get around without having any hassle. And I'm just so grateful for this mayor here, because he's a great man. And I remember when he was running, he was a man of his word, and I found him to stay being a man of his word. And anything that he's affiliated with is always a good thing.
Thank you.
He's a very honest man, and he's for the city. He's for New York. We might not agree on everything, but majority of the time, he's on point. So without hesitation, I'd like to introduce to some and present to others our mayor, Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Thank you very much, Frances. That was very, very kind, and thank you for all you do for this community. You, as president of the Residents Association for Red Hook East Houses, which is a very important development, very large development, and it takes a lot to be a leader of so many residents. I want to thank you for all you do looking out for the residents of public housing in Red Hook East and beyond, and looking out for the larger Red Hook community. It is community leaders like you that call upon us to do more for the community, to provide more options for people, better transportation, better jobs, more opportunities for young people. That's what I've heard you call upon us to do over and over, and obviously always protecting our public housing and making it stronger and better. So I want to thank you, and you deserve a round of applause. Well, it is wonderful to be here at the Pioneer Works. This is a great facility, and it is an example of the commitment that so many people have to Red Hook. There are so many residents who have been in Red Hook for a long time, fighting for the needs of a community that was so often left behind and ignored. There are so many people who believed that this community could be greater for its residents and worked hard for that. There are people who believe that great businesses could be created here, that could create opportunity for the residents of Red Hook and beyond. And I've been involved with this community now for 15 or 20 years, and had the honor of serving the community very directly when I was a school board member at the end of the 90s and the beginning of the last decade. And it is a wonderful community with such tremendous character, but it's been through a lot of struggle. But what you see over and over again is people who work to make this place better. One of the things I've talked about for years and years is everything good about Red Hook and all the fight, all the spirit, was always partly dealing with an uphill battle because it was so hard to get in and out of Red Hook and get access to jobs and opportunity. And that's why what we're talking about today is so important, because it's an opportunity to right that wrong for Red Hook and for a number of other communities, and particularly for tens of thousands of public housing residents who still don't get the opportunity and the access they deserve. So that's why this is very exciting on many, many levels. Now again, it's great to be here at the Pioneer Works. It's a beautiful building, and it is an example of something else we're seeing that's very important, which is the growth we're seeing along the Brooklyn and Queens waterfront. This is an area that is going to be so important to the future of New York City, because more and more we see that innovative people, creative people, entrepreneurial people want to be here. They see tremendous promise. You can see the amazing job growth and business growth that's happened over the last decade or two. Well, there's a lot more where that came from. And that's why we have to be ready for it, and we have to answer it by providing the kind of transportation that will allow that growth to benefit all, that allow those opportunities to be available to all. We've talked about for a long time the need for a true five-borough economy, not just an economy based on some of our traditional industries in Manhattan, but a true five-borough economy. Lots of good-paying jobs for working-class and middle-class people, but jobs people can get to, can actually reach in a fair amount of time so that they can take care of themselves and their families. That's what's happening here along the Brooklyn-Queens waterfront, but we need another piece of this equation to truly make it work, and that's what we're here to talk about today. There is housing right now being built for tens of thousands more people. There's millions of square feet of commercial space being built out along the Brooklyn-Queens waterfront. Between the people who live here now and the people who work here now, over 700,000 people connected to the Brooklyn-Queens waterfront, and tens of thousands more to come. But the neighborhoods themselves are disconnected from each other because, again, not a shock, the entire transit system of this city was built over decades and decades and decades with a single goal: get people from the outer boroughs into Manhattan and vice versa. The idea that our two biggest boroughs by population, Brooklyn and Queens, would have so much of a connection, that there would be so many businesses that needed to connect to each other, so many people who needed to connect to jobs, so many businesses needed to connect to their customers, that all of that would be going on between Brooklyn and Queens and between different neighborhoods within Brooklyn and within Queens. That was not part of the original vision and game plan that this city was built on. But times have changed. We're in an entirely different world now, where the center of gravity is shifting more and more to the outer boroughs, and particularly to our two most populous boroughs. And so we've got to answer that with a new kind of transportation and a new way to connect everyone. We're going to make this change to meet the 21st century reality and make this city work better for everyone. The next great step towards creating that five-borough economy, towards creating opportunity and addressing income inequality, towards making this extraordinary engine that is the Brooklyn-Queens waterfront all it can be, that next great step is the Brooklyn-Queens connector, the BQX. And we are so excited that this will now be a part of what makes New York City great. I want to thank everyone who's here with me. I'll just take a moment to do it because there's a lot of people who care deeply about this initiative. There is a saying that success has many fathers and mothers, and a lot of them are here who have really promoted this idea and are going to help us achieve it. So first, from my administration, I want to thank our Deputy Mayor for Housing and Economic Development, Alicia Glenn, our DOT Commissioner, Polly Trottenberg, and the President of the Economic Development Corporation, Maria Torres Springer. And then our hosts here at Pioneer Works, Dustin Yellen, the founder and director, and Gabrielle Florens, the director as well. I want to thank them for hosting us. Let's give a big round of applause to everyone from Pioneer Works. All of the leaders of the various public housing developments that will benefit from this expansion of mass transit option for all New Yorkers, and particularly for residents of public housing. I want to thank Lily Marshall of Red Hook West, Edward Tyree of Gowanus Houses, Valerie Bell of Wyckoff Gardens, and Harriet Hughes of Warren Street, and all the NYCHA resident board members are here. I want to just thank them for all they do for the residents of NYCHA. Let's give them a round of applause. And a number of community leaders are here, and these are folks, again, who care so deeply about Brooklyn and Queens and how to create more fairness and opportunity for folks. I want to just name them all. Juke Sue of the Coalition for Queens, Jill Eisenhart of the Red Hook Initiative, Doug Steiner of Steiner Studios, Tom Wright of the Regional Plan Association, Thomas Gretsch of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to all of you, and you're going to hear from a few other folks. Really appreciate the support and involvement in this effort. So, the BQX, what will it be? It'll be a state-of-the-art, zero emissions, very important point, clean and green, state-of-the-art streetcar that will run 16 miles from Astoria through Red Hook down to Sunset Park. This will create connections between many neighborhoods. It will connect them all to each other in a way that's never been true before. And it will connect this new light rail system to 10 ferry landings, 15 subway routes, and 30-plus bus lines. So it's just going to add to so many more options and ways for people to get around. And remember, every time we improve mass transit, every time we give people more options, it not only makes their lives better, it gives them more access to jobs, it makes their commute shorter, it also gives people yet another reason to get out of their cars and create less congestion on our streets. So there's so many wins here. And again, this means for 40,000 plus residents of public housing along this route, a whole new set of options that didn't exist before and much more access to opportunity. Now, our city has seen real strong employment hubs develop in recent years in Long Island City, in Sunset Park, in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We see more and more jobs being created here in Red Hook, and we know more mass transit will mean more jobs for Red Hook, and particularly more jobs for Red Hook residents. We also know that there'll be a tremendous amount of economic growth made possible by the presence of a new light rail line. We project over 30 years that the growth impact of this light rail will be $25 billion in economic activity. And it will be a crucial element of what we call the new economy for New York, a whole new way of thinking about this city and its economy that, again, looks at this as a five-borough economy, an economy that's not just Wall Street and some of the traditional industries, but much more about new manufacturing options, about fashion, about all the different pieces that we see now blossoming in these booming areas of the waterfront. Whole new areas of our economy, film and TV, technology, the shape of the economy of the future of New York City. And again, this is how we meet it and help it grow. More and more people are traveling this route in one form or another between Brooklyn and Queens, but they don't have a lot of ways to do it, and they certainly don't have ways to do it quickly enough. This will change that. For the price of a MetroCard fare, the BQX will improve the lives of so many New Yorkers. It will save them an average of 30 to 40 minutes a day in their commute in many, many cases, and we're excited about that. I'll give you an example. If you want to go from here in Red Hook to Dumbo, where there is now a booming new technology sector developing and lots of good paying jobs. If you want to go that, as a crow flies, it's not that far. But right now you'd have to get on the B61 bus and then take the F train from there. That would take you roughly 48 minutes. And if things were running slow, it would be closer to an hour. The BQX will cut that time in half. We'll take it down to just 20 minutes. So we're really going to open up opportunity for folks to get to jobs, get to them easily and quickly, and that's going to change lives. And by the way, what that also means for people in their everyday lives, particularly for parents, being able to spend more time with their children because they spend less time getting to and from work. If you take that one example and you play it out over a week, a Red Hook resident going to that job in Dumbo would save 5 hours a week simply by having this new option. And as I said in our State of the City address, this will save the most precious resource for New Yorkers, which is our time. This will give back people time that they can use for so many other good things. The projected cost of this project is $2.5 billion. Shovels will be in the ground by 2019. And the beauty of this project is it pays for itself. And it's very much like what was done to extend the number 7 train to the far west side of Manhattan. This new presence of a whole new transportation system will unlock tremendous new revenue. It will create revenue that wouldn't have been there otherwise and allow us to pay off the bonds that will allow us to build this system. BQX is part of a larger vision we have. We're very excited about citywide ferry service starting next year that will serve a number of communities. Again, the ferry service in many cases will go from outer borough locations to Manhattan and back and forth, serving people in many places that have been underserved. But it will also now connect to this BQX vision. We're doing more with select bus service routes. We're doing more with City Bike. The whole idea is to create more and more options, particularly in underserved areas and particularly in the outer boroughs, and get them all to connect with each other. Before I introduce some of my colleagues for you to hear from, let me just say a few words in Spanish. Los vecindarios a lo largo de las costas de Brooklyn y Queens han estado aislados por demasiado tiempo. Por eso estamos empezando the Brooklyn Queens Connect, un sistema de tranvía de 16 millas que creará oportunidades en esta importante zona de nuestra ciudad. Brooklyn Queens Connector impulsará la actividad económica en nuestras costas, ayudando a sus residentes a prosperar y ayudando a unirnos como una sola ciudad. With that, a dear friend and someone who has fought for so long to ensure opportunity and to ensure equality of opportunity for all our neighborhoods, and who passionately represents this neighborhood and many others in Brooklyn and Queens, Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. It's a great day for Red Hook. It's a great day for New York City. And indeed, the statement that we're making today is that this is one city. It's no longer Manhattan-centric. It's how can we seize economic opportunities that are happening across the city. And the most important element for a strong economy is to have a good transportation system. So this proposal holds great promise for our city on many fronts. By linking working and residential communities along the Brooklyn-Queens waterfront, we can help working families travel to and from jobs. Running 16 miles, much as the parallel Brooklyn waterfront Greenway would, the BQX will connect Astoria, Long Island City, Queens, to Williamsburg, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Vinegar Hill, Dumbo, downtown Brooklyn, to Red Hook, Gowanus, and Sunset Park. Working families need transportation alternatives, and streetcars have the potential to be part of that mix. This is one reason why I secured in 2005 a $300,000 federal grant for a 6-month study to examine the feasibility of a streetcar running from Red Hook to downtown Brooklyn. Talk about a community that lacks transportation and infrastructure. That is Red Hook. This technology will run on electricity, making it emission-free. As our city responds to climate change with resiliency measures, to withstand future storms, we must also work to reduce our carbon emissions. With any design of this magnitude, there are many moving parts, and we must work together to ensure that it's planned properly and fairly. The affected communities must be consulted to not only ensure their needs are being met by this new transit system, but so they have a say in how it is planned. Likewise, we must ensure working families fully benefit, that the service is affordable. We must also ensure that these plans are integrated with ongoing resiliency measures, industrial waterfront, and the build-out of the waterfront Greenway. Mr. Mayor, I remember in 2002 when 2 young men came to my office with this idea about building a greenway to connect all the waterfront communities. At the beginning, I thought that it was crazy. But then I said, well, why not? And we reached out to the city. They were skeptical. When I went ahead and secured the first $20 million for the design and initial construction of the Greenway. No one can deny how good it has been since it opened. And this is what it takes, is vision and the will to bring about things that we really need so that we empower entire communities, economically and in terms of transportation. At the end of the day, this project has great promise. But first, we need to look at how can it work. That said, I think this is a good step to really look at the possibilities, and I look forward to working with our mayor, Bill de Blasio, and the diverse stakeholders along the route to ensure this project benefits families, businesses, and workers of Brooklyn, Queens, and our entire city. Muchísimas gracias le doy al alcalde Bill de Blasio por anunciar este proyecto que va a crear una forma de transportación, de transvía, que va a beneficiar a comunidades que básicamente en este momento viven aislados, como es la comunidad aquí en Red Hook. Para que este tipo de proyecto pueda tener éxito, necesitamos el envolvimiento de todas las comunidades que van a ser afectadas. Y eso es algo que los oficiales electos mantendremos vigilantes para que sea un proyecto bueno. Debe tener la participación de todo el mundo. Gracias.
Thank you, Nydia. Now I want to introduce the president of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, Carlo Shishura.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By the way, Congresswoman, I will not try and replicate your Spanish because it's perfect, just like you. I can do Italian anytime. You know, this is, there's a couple of words for this. One of them is wow. One of them is transformative. One of them is game changer. Mr. Mayor, what you are doing today is creating a city of the future. And I think the mayor deserves incredible thanks for looking not just at, well, where is the economy today in February of 2016, but he is looking at where will the economy go tomorrow. And I think as you really look at what this will do, and I remember when you were on the school board in District 15 and I was on the school board in District 20, one of the things that we talked about was imagine getting kids to school faster. And there were studies done and ideas created. But imagine getting a student in the Red Hook houses who will now be able to go to a high school in Queens to study arts and culture and music and not have to take 2.5 hours each morning on a subway in the freezing cold and instead can get there in 45 minutes. That is a game changer. Imagine the young person who is, again, in the Red Hook houses, who is learning coding in school, thanks to one of your proposals, and now can get a job in Williamsburg or in Dumbo at the Jehovah's Properties and not have to worry about how am I going to get there? It's too expensive, but can get on their Metro card and do it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is revolutionary for New York City. I think this will open up commerce. It will open up creativity. You're linking 5.5 million people together in one system, and I think that this is something that 20 years from now, when we're all riding it, some of us will be riding it with our senior citizen Metro card, including me, but when we're riding it, we will say, wow, the mayor, the deputy mayor, the commissioners did something great. So Mayor, thank you for keeping your word and focusing on the boroughs, for opening up the opportunity for economy, and for really saying that the future is now. Thank you.
And I want to say that, Carlo, I really want to thank you for the outstanding support we've received from the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and so many businesses are excited about this new option for our city and for the borough. So thank you for your great support. I now want to introduce someone who's really focused on the issue of making sure that there's transportation access for all. He does it every day as the chair of the Transportation Committee in the City Council, Councilmember Ydanis Rodriguez.
First of all, I apologize for being late, but taking the A train and then taking a taxi to get here, you know, we witness the need to improve mass transportation to this region. First of all, I would like to say, no doubt that the city is so lucky to have a mayor that put his money where his mouth is. And this is what he's been doing on housing, public safety, education, and now on transportation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor de Blasio, and to the many partners who have made these projects possible. Today marks a new step for New York City, a down payment on a sustainable future brought forward by a mayor committed to bridging the gaps in income inequality across the city. The BQS is a type of infrastructure investments we need for the 21st century. The age of the urban car use is coming to a close, and investments in mass transit should continue to be our priority going forward. This streetcar will bring transit to what has long been a transit desert and will connect diverse communities booming from growth in density. For those in lower income communities, like here in Red Hook or those in Queensbridge, public transportation can mean easier access to a job or a way to connect with friends and families in other parts of the city. The ferry connections along the route will also make it easier to travel into Manhattan for those in communities cut off from other modes of transit. I applaud our mayor for his vision and investment, and I hope to see this as a model to bridge communities in desperate need of more transportation options. No hay duda que hoy estamos frente a un alcalde que pone el dinero donde está su visión, lo ha hecho en vivienda, en la seguridad pública, en transportación igual y en educación. Hoy, con esta inversión de más de $2 billones, los residentes de esta comunidad tendrán asequibilidad para ir a su trabajo, para visitar a su familia, y esto solamente es posible con un alcalde que tiene la visión para el futuro. Thank you.
And now I want to introduce someone who I first got to know as he fought to protect the people of the Red Hook community after Hurricane Sandy hit. And he knows so deeply the challenges people in this community have faced for years and the lack of opportunity, and understands how this is going to unlock so many new opportunities for people. Councilmember Carlos Menchaca.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Buenos dias a todos. I'm really excited to be here. I know the Congresswoman just left, but I have to say this. Before there was a Mayor de Blasio, before there was a Carlos Chasura at the Chamber, Tucker Reed at the partnership, before me, there was a Congresswoman. She has been thinking about the waterfronts that she represents for such a long time and putting investment at the planning stages to think about how we connect the world that we're talking about today, the BQX. And I just want to make sure that we honor that kind of commitment that was trailblazing. And at the end of the day, it's people like her that we need to honor because that's what we need. And today, I'm really excited, Mr. Mayor, that you have elevated this in a way that the mayor of the city of New York is going to take this kind of investment and idea, like the Congresswoman said, crazy idea, and make it real. And if there's anyone in this room that has the las ganas in this city to do things with bold measures, it's this mayor. And so I'm really excited to be part of your team and thoughtful process, which is why I'm going to talk a little bit about how I think we're going to make this happen and how we're going to continue to commit in this new administration, this new council, and the partners behind me. This is going to require immense community participation. The work that we are talking about is about economics. It's about connecting our immigrants and low-income workers, the day laborers in Sunset Park that are not going to be connected to work upstream in Astoria, for example. These are the kind of stories we're going to lift through the planning process, and we're going to hear them, and we're going to get them at the table. No matter if they speak English or not, they're going to be at the table designing the future of this city. BQX equals the future of the city, and this is why I'm really, really excited about what we're doing here today. I'm going to say something else that hasn't been said, but it's part of the concept. Not only are we connecting jobs and culture and art, we're also connecting healthcare. If you think about where we access healthcare today and you move all the time, you might have a doctor somewhere along this line that you can now reach in a real way. So this is also about health. And I'm really happy the Red Hook Initiative is here, who's always thinking with us on that front. But I'm really excited about that too. And finally, what I want to say is I'm going to put another idea to the planning part. I ride my bike everywhere. And it'd be great if this future train, tranvía, can also take a couple of bikes. I'm hoping that a family in Sunset Park can ride up the Greenway all the way up to Astoria. Maybe they're a little bit tired and they can bring their bikes on this train right back home. So that's my idea for the day. Thank you so much for being here today in Red Hook.
There you go. Finally, someone who represents the extraordinary new economic activity that's occurring all over downtown Brooklyn, and is really another example of what we want to spark and continue to build. The president of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, Tucker Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to be here on behalf of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership today and our friends in Dumbo and the Navy Yard, who since the creation of the Brooklyn Tech Triangle in 2012 have been calling for a transit solution like this. Just want to say 3 quick things. One, this is the biggest economic development proposal in a generation. In the way that the East River bridges provided east-west connections in the late 19th and early 20th century to unite the 5 boroughs of the city and unlock economic potential for countless generations of New Yorkers, the BQX has the potential to provide a north-south connection that does the same. And that growth, to my second point, doesn't need to be limited to one form or another. As the council member just adequately said, it can provide an engine for growth that hits all sorts of much-needed city services, whether it's affordable housing, and particularly, I think, office growth, industrial growth, retail growth. If you look at all the demographics across growth in this area, whether it's housing, employment growth, in my humble opinion, we're on the verge of an economic revolution in the outer boroughs, and the BQX will provide a vehicle that will help make that true. And then finally, a vision like this that is big requires a lot of courage, and I really commend Mayor de Blasio for taking this up, for Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn, for DOT Commissioner Polly Trottenberg, who I might mention has a lot of experience with streetcars working at federal DOT, and our EDC President Maria Torres Springer for having the guts to make this a reality. There'll be a lot of naysayers in the next couple of weeks that'll say why this can't be done. There'll be millions of New Yorkers that will thank you in generations to come. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to take questions on this topic first, and then we'll take questions on other topics after. Jillian.
So this area where we're sitting right now is part of a FEMA flood zone, and much of the Brooklyn and Queens waterfront is in the same kind of situation. How would the city plan for the fact that this area could be inundated, very easily in a future flood event?
I'm going to start, and Alicia, Maria, Polly, anyone feel free to jump in. So first of all, let's begin at the beginning. We've had flooding because of global warming, and we have to address global warming in every way we can. This city's deeply committed to the goal of reducing emissions by 80% by the year 2050. This is one of the ways we do it. Get more and more people onto mass transit. Get them out of their cars. Use transportation that does not create harmful emissions. That's why the BQX is such a powerful idea in terms of the environment to begin with, getting at the root of the problem. By the way, there are parts of this world where mass transit is so good that people don't even think about needing to use their cars to do the basics of life. We need to create that in this city more and more. That's why the ferry system, the BQX, the more select bus service, more city bike. We need to do all of that to get people out of the cars. Second, in terms of what we're doing to prepare ourselves overall to deal with flooding issues, that's where all these new resiliency measures are coming into place. $20 billion being spent over the next years to protect this waterfront and many other parts of the city. So we're going to be in a very different situation than we were a few years ago when Sandy hit. Third, Sandy taught us something very valuable. The subways are particularly vulnerable. Now, I think the MTA has been doing very important work to add resiliency to the subways, but in fact, surface transportation will come back online a lot quicker than subways under many situations. So having a light rail system actually gives us something that we think will be there despite whatever happens with the flooding, even if sometimes the subways are compromised. Anything you want to add, anyone? Okay.
Follow-up.
Please.
Where's the power located? Like, would this be underground, or is it self-powered within the train car?
You're way ahead of me. Who wants? I'm going to give you a little extra. All right.
Yeah.
Hold on. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the exciting thing now with streetcars is because so many cities actually have been getting into the game, the technology is really improving dramatically. There are now a lot of versions of streetcars that are basically self-powered. They're using a battery-type technology. And I think the exciting thing for this city is when we order cars, we'll have enough of a critical mass that I think we'll be able to drive some really innovative technologies. So I think the car technology is going to be great. It won't have, for the most part, catenaries. It'll be self-propelled.
catenaries? Would you like to tell the audience?
I think the audience knows the overhead
No,
wires.
I don't think the audience knows, because I, for one, don't know what a catenary is.
Very sophisticated audience. The overhead wires that you traditionally see with an urban streetcar system, but increasingly now there's technologies where you don't need to use those wires.
Oh, those catenaries?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Connection to subway, buses, and ferry, and also being able to ride, excuse me, for the price of a MetroCard swipe. So I'm wondering, can you guarantee like free transfers from the streetcar to stations that it's close to? How close are you in discussions?
Well, we've just begun. Obviously, this was announced a couple of weeks ago. We look forward to those conversations with MTA. We want to maximize the ability of people to connect across all of these options. But look, I think we should also remember a lot of people are going to take this just to take this. They're going to go from one point along this line to another point, and that's going to have value. And what we're saying about the BQX is the same thing we're saying about the new citywide ferry service. The cost will be the price of a MetroCard fare for that service. So we're going to create total equality on the systems we build with what the MTA has. People will pay the same price. Getting the transfers worked out is something that will take some detailed work with the MTA. We've just announced this, so there's going to be more to be done on that. But there's no question about the fact that the cost of this will be pegged exactly to the MetroCard.
Mr. Mayor, it's just 70% of the right-of-way, this route will have its own right-of-way. Why not go with a system that's more like a light rail system, closer to light rail, that's faster and can carry more passengers, or a bus rapid transit system that, as some critics have noted, could carry more passengers, go farther, and also cost a lot less?
Well, I'll start, and then my colleagues should add. The development of light rail, we believe, is going to create a lot more revenue that, again, will pay ultimately for the light rail. We can't say that about bus service. We just know for a fact it doesn't create the same dynamic. Again, we're very excited about the fact that this will be a clean and green system. So in terms of no emissions, it will be exemplary, and that's important to us. And it'll be faster because of the nature of light rail. So those are reasons why this brings something that a bus system doesn't. Does anyone want to add to that? Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
On the light rail question, I mean, more traditional light rail systems can go faster than 11 miles per hour. So I just didn't know why typically the city opted for a more traditional streetcar system versus, a light rail system like you see like in New Jersey.
I'm happy to jump in on that, Andrew. And I think what we're proposing, it's actually going to be a bit of a hybrid, which is typically the distinction between light rail and streetcars. A light rail is moving on a dedicated right-of-way. Streetcar is moving in traffic. But I think our goal here is to have streetcars going to be in traffic, but as much as we can, a right-of-way where we'll be keeping traffic out so that we can achieve speeds that are going to make, the real travel time savings that we're talking about here. And in terms of buses, as you know from our select bus service, we're typically using that in areas where we have very high bus ridership. We're not seeing a lot more development, but we just want to improve the travel times for folks that are there, as opposed to a light rail investment where you're going to be seeing a huge growth in development and density.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Media questions? Yes? No? Media? Go ahead.
I'm not media.
Not media. Okay. In the back.
Mr. Mayor, some planners are concerned that the kind of deciding factor in whether this is actually going to serve poor people, working people, is if it's integrated with an unlimited ride MetroCard, a senior card, a student card, that actually people on a fixed income can't afford to pay twice, even if it's the same price. What are the prospects for that?
Again, I'll start and welcome Polly or Alicia want to add to it. Look, I think we can say pretty safely, after people watch 2 years of what we're doing, we're looking for every way we can to address income inequality and to open up opportunity for people. So anything we can do to lower the cost of transportation, make it more available, make those transfers available, for example, is what we want to do. Now, we have other entities we have to work with. But in terms of this immediate opportunity, you'll remember this was true with the ferry service before. Previous ferry service used to cost more. We said ferry services would be pegged exactly where MetroCard is as an affordability point. This too, this is a big new system, but we're going to keep the cost pegged to the MetroCard. We will have to figure out if we're creating our own independent approach to a card or whether we're doing something integrated with the MTA. But any way you slice it, we're going to be responsive to the needs of seniors and low-income folks. Anyone want to add? fine with that.
Oh, wow, I'm so tall.
Your
I just,
power over Polly.
I would just add that obviously the conversations with the MTA will be ongoing in terms of complete fare integration. But when we looked at the operating expenses of what we expect the system to run, we assumed, independent of whether or not we had fare integration, that we would be able to offer the same student and senior discounts as are currently available on the MTA, so that those folks would still have the same degree of discount available to them even if we didn't have complete fare integration.
Buy two, they would have to buy a trolley car, card, and
Yeah, again, that is a perfectly fair question. Let me say it this way. Our goal is full integration, maximum transfers, et cetera, obviously, because that's a way to create opportunity and access and fight inequality, unquestionably. We've got to work that through with the MTA. There's a lot of moving parts there. But even if this were a thing unto itself, and as the Deputy Mayor said, had appropriate discounts, it would still be adding intensely to people's options and ability to get around. And again, a lot of people are just going to take this from one point to another without necessarily transferring. So this is progress unto itself, and we're going to certainly make it accessible to people, but we want to go as far as we can to connect it to all the other pieces. Let me just take a moment to say it's nice to have some of the kind words of praise I received from the previous speakers, but credit where credit is due. Alicia Glenn has put, and her whole team have put immense time and energy into developing this initiative. Let's give them. We finally succeeded in making Alicia Glenn blush. It's a great day for New York City all around. Okay, yes.
State and city politicians in Bay Ridge, Coney Island, and Sheepshead Bay have criticized the plan. Some saying that the streetcar wouldn't go far enough. Others saying that there should be an equal investment in MTA infrastructure in those areas. I was hoping you could respond to that.
Well, let me separate a couple of pieces. Obviously, we have for a long time have encouraged the MTA to invest much more deeply in the outer boroughs, particularly in underserved areas of the outer boroughs, and there's still a lot more work to be done on that front. In terms of critiquing, I would say that people should support each other's neighborhoods. And if we have a whole group of neighborhoods here that have not had enough service, they're now going to get more service, I think we should all celebrate that. And of course, ask the question, can we go farther and can we reach other areas? And we're going to see if that's possible. This, to me, is a good and noble experiment to see if we can make this one work. It could open the door to light rail in other parts of the city as well. Now, this happens to be a place of particularly concentrated population and economic growth, and a particular ability to get that new revenue that would pay for the light rail. So there's a set of conditions here that may be different than many other places. But if it works here, it's going to make it easier to do light rail in other places that could use it as well. Yes?
How much actual increased value is the city assuming it will receive each year, beginning in the first year that the city has to start paying for it? What's the number for that?
So the way in which the financing is structured is we've taken what's called the transit premium associated with the streetcar system, which is somewhere between 2% and 4%. And so we capture that incremental 2% and 4% above what the taxes would otherwise have been. And that increment then goes to pay back the bonds. And that begins much faster than, for example, the extension of the 7 line, where you had to rely exclusively on future development. So we have a combination here of obviously catalyzing new development, which will be the bulk of the increment, but we also will be able to capture some increment much faster. So when we actually go to finance the project, we're expecting that transit premium to pay for all of the costs of purchasing and installing the system.
How will you the loss of parking spaces from building the streetcar space on the main roads, right? And there will be a significant loss.
Yeah, so let me preface, I'll offer some thoughts and then my colleagues may want to add. You know, I have 2 things just to give a frame of reference. So I was a council member for 8 years representing neighborhoods in Brooklyn that were overwhelmingly homeowner neighborhoods. A lot of people own cars. Parking was a very real issue. And for me, as a car driver and owner who spent many nights, 10, 15, 20 minutes looking for a parking space, I certainly understand the challenge. I think there's a chicken and egg reality here. I had a car because I had a family and there was a lot of places you couldn't access very easily on mass transit. the more mass transit we have, the less people will need their cars. We also have to get away from our cars because we have to reduce emissions and we have to prepare for a very different reality in the future. So I think this is the kind of thing that is a step towards a new reality in the city where we're going to increasingly make it easier for people to get around without a car. We don't yet have a sense of what the impact would be on parking because the routes still have to be refined. We're going to be sensitive to that point. We're going to look to minimize the impact on parking wherever we can. But I think given the many, many benefits of this project, it will more than be appropriate in terms of any trade-off with parking. Anyone want to add? Please. Maria Torres Springer, who definitely needs a little extra height.
Yes,
she has a very big brain, but she needs a little height there.
I'd like to add that whether it's parking or other potential concerns that community residents across the city, across the corridor might have, what we're undertaking over the course of the next several weeks and months is a very intensive engagement process. So what we're calling design, planning, and outreach is intended to make sure that we visit with all of the communities along the corridor to make sure that they have information about what we are trying to build here, but as importantly, hear all of their concerns so that as we move forward, those are concerns that we can address and mitigate for the most successful new transit line that we can build.
Let me add that we are going to be deeply engaged with Congresswoman Velasquez and Councilman Menchaca and other elected officials, community boards, et cetera, because we really want to fine-tune this with them. It's a very big project. It'll go forward over many years. We really want to get this right with that community input, and I agree with Carlos on that fully. Yes?
Mayor, in 2011, the DOT did a feasibility study on a streetcar, mostly in Red Hook to downtown, and there were a lot of concerns about the prohibitive cost of moving the underground infrastructure, the narrow streets, and even as recently as 2014, when the Staten Island Borough President wanted a feasibility study for streetcars, Commissioner Trottenberg said that the city wasn't really looking at that option. What has changed since that study and that notice?
Well, first of all, 2 years have passed where we look very intensely at a specific idea. This is different than going from Red Hook to downtown Brooklyn. It's different than the North Shore of Staten Island. This is a particular proposal. And we found that the engineering was possible. We looked very intensely, and my colleagues again can speak to this, at all the considerations that we had to study. And we came to the conclusion it was possible and that the financing would be there, which again may not be true in other situations. Now, I emphasize to people in southern Brooklyn, to people in Staten Island who are interested in light rail, I think this is the best way to get there, to take an example that is particularly promising, that has a lot of support, that has really strong financing potential, and see if we can make it work here, and that's the best gateway to seeing if it's possible in other places. So the simple answer is we spent 2 years looking at the issue and decided there was more possibility than had been seen previously. Anyone want to add? Or? Okay. Yes.
What's the latest on conversations with the MTA over possibly using similar financing structures to finance later phases of other transit projects like the Second Avenue subway later phases?
I'll see if Polly or Alicia, anyone has heard of such conversation. We've been focused on this one right now, but
It gets a little bit at the North Shore BRT question too, because I think obviously with a lot of the key projects we're looking at around the city, we are talking to the MTA. And on the North Shore BRT, at the time it didn't make sense for the city to do the study, but now in part thanks to the mayor's contribution to the capital plan, the MTA will be looking at that and something that they would potentially considering in their much larger capital plan. As you know, Andrew, you know this well, the governor has certainly challenged the MTA for its upcoming capital works, Phase 2 Second Avenue and other projects to start to see if there are more innovative financing and project delivery mechanisms they can use. And we've been in some discussion with them. I don't think they've come to an answer yet on any of it, but it's certainly something they're looking at.
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about Washington, D.C., for example? Their project, their streetcar's been really delayed and over budget. How do you avoid some of those pitfalls? What would be different here? Other problematic systems?
We love Washington, D.C., but we're different. And I think we have tremendous capacity here for major projects, and Polly can speak to the specifics.
This is actually one I do know a lot about, having come from Washington, and have talked to some of the folks that have been involved in that project. And I think, fortunately, here in New York City, we're going to get to learn from some of their lessons about how you make what type of key decisions you need to make up front about technology, about alignment, about potential funding, about how you're going to handle the real estate development. And so again, I think DC's idea was a terrific one, and hopefully it will be up and running soon. But certainly we've been in close contact with them and some of our other colleagues who are doing streetcars not only in the United States but in other parts of the world. And I think, again, the exciting thing is, bringing back the streetcar is something that's now really a national and a worldwide phenomenon. We're going to benefit tremendously from the things our colleagues, some of the things they wish they'd done better and some of the things they've done well.
Is it possible that a neighborhood like Red Hook will lose its bus line, the B61, where the streetcar runs down the bus?
I'll start, and Polly wants to add. I don't think we start with that assumption at all. I think there's so much need for transportation of so many kinds. Remember, again, there are parts of the world where mass transit is so available that people literally don't have to think about using a car. And, the United States has never been one of those places. New York City is better than almost any place else, but we have huge gaps in our transit system. So we need a lot more mass transit. By the way, look what's happening on so many of our subway lines, the level of overcrowding. That's because there's no other viable option. But when you add on ferry service, when you add the BQX, when you add more select bus service, you add more city bike, this all starts to add up and it relieves pressure on the subway system as well. So I work from the assumption that we need all of the above. But I can also say if the MTA ended up with any excess capacity, there sure are parts of the outer boroughs that could use a lot more bus service. So, there's many good places where resources could be applied. Anything to add? Okay, yes, in the back.
This is premised on rising real estate values and the taxes they generate, which also can mean rising rents and more gentrification and displacement. What is the administration going to do to protect people who are still hanging on in some of these waterfront neighborhoods?
Well, a couple of different points. First of all, as we've said from the beginning, tens of thousands of the people who live in these neighborhoods live in our public housing buildings, and those we're going to protect with everything we've got. That is permanent, affordable housing. We're going to defend NYCHA at all costs. But for so many people who live in public housing buildings here in Red Hook and in so many other places, they don't have access to jobs, they don't have access to other opportunities. So that has to be fixed. When someone rightfully raises the gentrification issue, it's the 800-pound gorilla of New York City. We have to talk about what we can do to address it, as what I talked about in the State of the City a year ago. Looking away is not an answer. It is happening. It's happening on a very large scale. It's going to keep happening. The city's growing. The city is becoming a more and more attractive place for businesses and residents of all kinds. So standing back and doing nothing is the worst of all worlds. Having a coherent policy to maximize opportunity for low-income people who are going to be exactly where they are, and that includes folks in our NYCHA buildings and a lot of our other affordable housing developments and a lot of folks who live in rent-stabilized housing. They need a lot more opportunity. They need a lot more transit options. That is a crucial element. That transcends gentrification. That's going to be true under any scenario. But what is also true is if we don't aggressively create new affordable housing, preserve affordable housing we have, then those development pressures will swamp the situation. So we believe it's necessary to have a very aggressive affordable housing plan and more jobs for working class and middle class people so they can actually afford to be here, because that's the other problem. We know what's happened. We've had a lot of job growth in low wage, low benefit jobs. The jobs we're talking about on the Brooklyn Queens waterfront are much more consistently higher wage, higher benefit jobs. So we want to maximize that kind of job growth and the connection of people to them. So gentrification is a real challenge. We have an aggressive set of tools that we're putting in play to deal with it. But if we didn't do this, there's still going to be growth. There's still going to be change. We'd rather manage that growth, manage that change, and maximize the potential for working people and middle-class people in the bargain. In the back, anyone? Okay, go ahead.
As part of the 2-year review that you mentioned for this project, has the city done a new, wider feasibility study, or are you planning to do one?
Oh, there'll be many studies along the way. We can talk about what we've done so far. Many, many studies.
Over the course of the last couple of years, we have been looking at this particular proposal to do an assessment of its general feasibility, and that includes issues of where you might build it, how you might finance it, and what it might take to get it up and running. Over the course, it's an ongoing study, of course, in many ways. We are just at the beginning. And so what will follow in the next few years are intensive community and a community engagement process, an intensive design and planning phase, the public approvals that need to occur as we march as aggressively as possible towards breaking ground by 2019, 2020.
Just beginning the feasibility study, how do you know that it's feasible?
We certainly looked at potential alignments. We estimated, of course, the cost of construction of this type of system. We did incredible research and due diligence as to the financing mechanism that we might use. But a lot of this work is certainly kind of a block-by-block analysis, and that will continue in the weeks and months to come.
But that gets to the point that Councilmember Menchaca made about Congresswoman Velasquez. We're never going to get anywhere as a city if we don't try to do big, bold things. We have to adapt to a new set of circumstances. Here is an extraordinary opportunity. Now, we're going to go at it with real meticulousness, and we're going to be honest about the challenges we find along the way. But we're not going to ignore a great opportunity that could improve the lives of hundreds of thousands of people simply because it's difficult. A lot of great things are difficult. This is an opportunity that's too good to pass up. Okay, last call on this topic. Yes, we got 1 and 2. Go ahead.
You alluded to.
Okay, we got 3. Go ahead.
You alluded to potential future other streetcar lines. Where do you see this, the city's involvement in streetcars, from here on out? Do you envision years from now a network like New York had up until the 1950s?
I'm not there yet, but I'll tell you this much. Right, let's get one going. But what we do see is a very productive role for the city to play, which we've seen with the ferry system, which we've seen with the BQX and with City Bike, and certainly Select Bus Service. There's things that we can do to greatly increase transit options, and we're going to look at any and all of those going forward. This one will be a whole new world. When you think about each of these, you can sort of see a symmetry. City Bike was started, and we give the previous administration a lot of credit. We've been able to build upon it and expand it to many more areas. Ferry service existed in smaller ways. We had the vision of a truly citywide ferry service. We're going to see how far we can take it. The initial plan is very ambitious, but we're also obviously going to look for how far we can go from there. Select Bus Service has continued, a good idea that proved itself, continued to be built out across the 5 boroughs. So here's the next big thing. If we can make this light rail system work, of course we're going to look at other options, and the North Shore of Staten Island is a great example. But the key thing is we're going to have to find the financing. We found a mechanism here, just like in the previous administration, they found a mechanism for the number 7 train extension. We're going to keep looking for where those options may exist. So we don't have a grand vision of a citywide light rail system yet, but we do think this will be the case that could prove the possibility of how much farther we can go.
Question for you. How many cars would be on this line at any one time? And actually, what time would it take to get from point A to point B, from start to end?
I'm not sure we have that level of detail yet, but we might. We have some estimates. Okay.
So we estimate that for the entire system, it's probably a stock of about 60 cars. And as we've been thinking, I think the alignment, the goal is to have stops at every half mile. That ensures that it provides the right type of access, and we can still maintain the appropriate speeds for it to be a competitive form of transportation.
Okay, we had someone in the back. Yes, sir.
The figure you've given of 2019 for having a shovel in the ground, is that too optimistic given the hurdles that you still have to clear with?
Well, my colleagues would like to say 2020, and I'd like to say 2019. So, look, everything we do is different. What we did with pre-K is different than what we did with Muni ID, is different from what we did with affordable housing. or public safety, but I can safely say we've put forward a number of very bold goals, and we have been achieving them. So I think this team is good enough that they can take that 2019 goal and live up to it. So that's the optimum. We know there's a lot of moving parts, and again, we're going to be honest along the way with what our studies are finding. We could find things are easier, we could find they're harder, but my goal is to get shovels in the ground in 2019. Last call on this topic, media questions. Okay, last call on this topic. We'll look forward to say hi to everyone afterwards who's not from media, but let's just finish the press conference. We're going to go to off topic in a second. Last call on this topic. Going once, going twice. We are now in off topic. Go ahead.
So Governor Cuomo came out today with a call to shut down Rikers Island, and he agrees with the speaker. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Look, I understand, obviously, the idea that we have to make major changes in our correction system. And there is a certain appeal to the notion of starting over, but it's a very complicated idea. So all of the people who are promoting the idea, the Speaker, the Governor, Judge Lippman, who I have tremendous respect for, are, I think, expressing a very honest idea that has a lot of merit. The problem is it would cost many billions of dollars, and I have to look out for what's feasible, and I have to look out for the taxpayer. And it would require some kind of new facilities, because we can't, even though we're very proud of the fact we've been driving down the population at Rikers, and there's a lot more to come in terms of summons reform, bail reform, a lot of other initiatives that we think can drive down that population another 1,000 or 2,000 people and shorten the length of stay, which is also crucial in terms of some of the judicial system reforms that we need to see. But in the end, you still are going to need facilities. Where are you going to put them? How are you going to pay for them? So a noble concept, but one that will cost many billions of dollars, and we do not have a viable pathway to that at this point.
That you're open to right now?
Well, I think when I say something's a noble concept, it means I see the merit in it, but we can't embrace something until we figure out where would we then put the inmates, how would we pay for it, would it be logistically viable? We don't have any of those answers right now. So a well-intended concept, far from the point where we could actually act on it.
Since the governor did speak about it today, is there a role for the state in that? Do you see a role for the state to be a part of that?
We are certainly open to that. The state can help us to address all of the issues that it would require. It would take a lot of money, as I said, billions of dollars that right now we do not have, and many other logistical issues. The state is ready to work with us on that. We certainly welcome it. Rich.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to refer to a couple of little notes here for this question.
Please.
So a report just came out from federal monitor Peter Zimroff, who filed at the federal court today, and a quote of it is, New York police struggle to follow new street stop policy. And one of the issues here is in more than a quarter of the encounters, officers failed to document the suspicion that prompted them to stop a person for questioning, and apparently sergeants have signed off on these reports even though that was left blank. So just your immediate, I know you haven't read the report.
No, I haven't.
Action.
I haven't read the report, so I don't want to react in specificity, but I would say we understand that we're in a transition. NYPD is working very closely with the federal monitor to figure out how to do things better going forward. We obviously want good and accurate information, but that's also about training all of our officers in how to do that properly. As you know, Commissioner Bratton is very focused on retraining and clarifying how our officers should handle a host of situations. So we'll look at it, and we'll certainly keep working with the monitor on it.
Mayor, just to go back to the Rikers issue, I know obviously closing Rikers is, a long way down the road, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on Judge Lippman sort of leading this task force type review of what's going on at Rikers and sort of trying to map out maybe a feasibility towards that noble.
Sure.
Some
Well, I think the world of Judge Lippman. I think he was an outstanding leader of our court system. I share a lot of worldview with him, and I welcome his involvement. But I want to be real with people. This is a very big, costly, complicated endeavor, and I don't think it's fine for others to put forward the idea or support the idea and honestly look at how it might be achieved. My job is to level with the people in New York City. This will cost billions and billions of dollars, be logistically very difficult, and we don't have the alternative space right now. But we're happy to work with Judge Lippman and everyone else to see if there are good options. Who hasn't gone yet? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we wrote last week that a DOE official wrote her own job description essentially so that she would meet the criteria that she didn't otherwise meet. I'm wondering if that's something that you think should be investigated.
I haven't seen that report, and I don't know of any problem on that front. Who else in the back? Yes.
Also on this report from the Federal Monitor, they said the NYPD is dropping too many minorities. What do you think of that?
Again, I haven't seen the report, so I'd have to look at it. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, a tourist from Arkansas yesterday was assaulted and seriously injured at the Staten Island Ferry. It now appears that the suspect in that might be part of a group that had been preying on tourists. First, a reaction from you, and two, would you like to see perhaps a crackdown on groups like this that prey on the tourists?
Oh, of course, we're going to crack down on anyone who commits a crime in this city, and particularly if there's any kind of organized effort, we want to get at it at its root and cut it off. And I think NYPD has done an amazing job. When you look at the reduction in serious crime over the last 2 years, NYPD is doing better and better at getting at the root causes, getting at any systematic criminal activity, getting at gangs and crews. So if there's something aimed at tourists or aimed at the Staten Island Ferry, we will get at it very, very aggressively. We obviously deeply appreciate that people come to visit us. We had the highest number of tourists we've ever had last year, 58 million plus, and we want to keep it that way. In the back, yeah.
When you say, and I want to characterize it right, but basically that closing Rikers is, for one thing, really expensive.
Yes, billions and billions of dollars.
Has City Hall done its own studies of the possibility of shutting down Rikers?
Study is too big a word. We obviously, look, there is a certain sense to the idea. We have a broken situation at Rikers. It has been for years. We have a culture that desperately needs changing now. Our job is to fix it right now, because any discussion of something new, you're talking probably 5 to 10 years in the future at best. We got to fix the problem right now. And I'm very pleased with the efforts of Commissioner Pont and his team to reduce violence in the facilities where they've applied their new strategies. So that's what we're going to focus on. We've got a lot of problems to address right now to bring down violence and change the culture of Rikers. But we've looked at the basic question, if we even wanted to entertain something different, what would it take? And again, we know immediately it's a very complicated and costly undertaking. But that's not a reason not to discuss it. It's certainly a worthy discussion.
Can I ask you, the Daily News had a story about Airbnb last week.
Yes.
They had dropped 1,000 listings that might have been illegal. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm very troubled by this. We certainly want to work with the sharing economy, and I appreciate what's good about the sharing economy. But if these reports are true and Airbnb is purposely withholding information and, in fact, providing misinformation, that's unacceptable. We will not tolerate that. So let's be very clear. We have greatly increased the resources available for enforcement related to Airbnb and similar services, because we have so many complaints from neighborhood residents. So we're definitely going to go very hard at any building where, in fact, there's an illegal hotel, where it's not an individual renting out a room a few times a month, but a systematic illegal hotel. We're going to go at that very hard. We're going to go at anyone who has benefited from one of our affordable housing programs and is supposed to follow certain rules and is breaking those rules by their participation in Airbnb. We're really going to be very aggressive here. But I would say to Airbnb, if they want goodwill and they want a good working relationship with the City of New York, they must be transparent. They must provide us all the information accurately, not sugarcoat it, and show us what's really going on, because we're going to enforce the law. Last call. Anything else? Yes?
Do you want to weigh in at all on the debate over whether President Obama should nominate?
Oh, sure. Yes, I do, and I thank you. Well, I'm going to borrow from some great public servants who have spoken to this. The simplest and most powerful to me was Senator Leahy, who is the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, who said there has not been a one-year vacancy on the Supreme Court since the Civil War. It has never been allowed or considered in the past to leave a Supreme Court seat vacant for a year, and that's what you're talking about here. January 20 is when the next president comes on board. That would require beginning a nomination process that would go on for months and months. You're talking about a vacancy that would be more than a year. It's unacceptable. And then I want to reference what Senator Schumer said. The U.S. Constitution does not talk about the President of the United States only serving for 3 years of a 4-year term. He's in the 4th full year of a term. Of course he has a right to nominate a new Supreme Court justice. And I actually think the people are going to weigh in here very strongly. I don't think the people of this country will tolerate the notion of the Senate Republicans stonewalling a legitimate nomination by the President of the United States to fill not only a Supreme Court seat, but the seat that will tip the balance and allow decisions to be made on so many issues. This one's really straightforward. We should respect our Constitution. Certainly everyone would agree Justice Scalia was deeply respected for his strict adherence to the Constitution. The Constitution tells us very clearly the President will nominate a Supreme Court justice, and the Senate should duly consider that justice and vote. That's the only way forward. Thank you, everyone.